The third branch of Buddhism that we wanted to mention briefly today was Vajrayana, and that is the diamond vehicle. And sometimes this form of Buddhism is called esoteric because it's not openly taught, or it's basically hidden. And this branch uses chants and rituals to gain supernatural, supernormal powers, but it may be thought of as combining shamanism to create their form of belief, art, and ritual. Again, the translation on the PowerPoint is very accurate. It does mean the vehicle of the diamond. Sometimes people may call it the vehicle of the lightning bolt. But that name may suggest whether a diamond or lightning bolt suggests strength, clarity, wisdom, and flashes of light. And those maybe you could see how they're associated with enlightened awareness. All right, so these are some of the branches of Buddhism, again, that we can see. Our book does talk about. There's a little bit more than what I have mentioned here in the video. Let me mention a few other things about Vajrayana, Buddhism. But there, if you've ever seen the movie Little Buddha or 7 Years in Tibet, now it's a good example of some of this branch of Buddhism that we're talking about today. Again, it goes back quite a way, but it does emphasize some of the same major things we have mentioned about Buddhism, but it's highly symbolic. For example, bells may symbolize wisdom. There's a prayer wheel that is also important in this branch of Buddhism. But the prayer wheel is a cylinder that revolves around a central pole, and then prayers are put on paper inside, and then it is turning the prayers around that causes the good karma. Music and dance are very big, used by the shamans to protect against demons in this branch. Mantras are used, of course, with meditation. One of the big ones is the jewel o lotus ah. But that is one that they use in meditation. All right. Now there's some other things that happen. The mandalas are some of the. It's a sacred cosmic diagram. It takes on many forms, but the purpose of it is used in meditation. And one common form that mandalas take is a circle enclosed within a square. Now, Buddhists are going to believe that everything always changes, so that's very important to remember. Now, with all of these three, there is quite a bit of information in the textbook. I've tried to give you a condensed version, but what our book does is further break it down into further branches within these in some cases, and then tells you a little bit about their rituals, their celebrations, the symbols that they use, some of their scriptures. I'll come back to that near the end of the video and give you some examples. I wanted to kind of stay close to the slides right now, but there's just a lot of it. But the main point is what we're covering in the slides. So let's move on to some of the last few slides, and these are really a lot about the terminology. I've mentioned some of these words that we've seen. Some of them refer to the elements that are used in the different schools of Buddhism. And then the Vajra, for example, we talked about the rod or scepter. Now, that's in the third branch of Buddhism we talked about. At the beginning of the video, we mentioned the stupa at the temple that the author had visited there, that the Buddhist temple that the author had mentioned. I'm sure most of you have heard the word mantra before. That shows you how far these things have traveled and come, and some of these are maybe a little bit newer. Now in Blackboard, what I have done is when you go to each chapter, at the end of each chapter in Blackboard, there's an activity that has all the vocabulary terms. So all these terms on the last few slides, you can practice with them in the Quizlet application I have put in Blackboard. So if you think that would be helpful, then you can use it. It's not for grade, but it's just simply to get maybe a better handle on some of these vocabulary terms that you may not have encountered before. All right, so again, just a few key concepts, and some of these we see in Hinduism and Buddhism. Again, there's going to be some blending of the religions that happen. The samsara is the recognition that things change in the world and that there is pain. This may remind you in part of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path that we had mentioned a little bit earlier. Again, some of these ideas seem to repeat just a little bit. Nirvana is the ultimate goal of the Buddhists. The dukkha, the dharma, and the sangha. We talked a little bit about the sangha, that community of monks and nuns. And then again, some of the dharma are the written teachings of Buddhists that were written down after the death of the Buddha. His teachings were primarily oral, and then after he died, it was decided to write them down, and then there was some disagreement over the contents of those teachings. All right, so now one of the slides here I wanted to come back to. It's got the last concept on the slide was the Tripitaka, the three baskets of Buddhist scripture. And it's sometimes called I think the slide is a little off, but it might be called the Trikaya doctrine, but it's the three-body doctrine. And it really focuses, now here's your three parts: the cosmic Buddha, the transformational body of Buddha, and that's called the Nirmankaya, and the Maitreya is the third doctrine, but it is the future Buddha to usher in a golden age. So it's just, again, different ideas of Buddha, his physical body or his cosmic body, or, hey, if Buddha is coming back to usher in a new golden age. Now, some of these, there's even more, but these are the three basic ones in this Trikaya doctrine. But if you've ever seen a picture of Buddha as overweight, joyful, and laughing, that goes to more of China and Vietnam, but it's called the Mi Lo Pho. But that's an interesting image I think I have seen before. That, again, and it gives you a little reference as to how it's come about. The Bodhisattva, we mentioned that, but that's the person is a saintly person of great compassion, and what they're trying to do is help people in this world achieve nirvana and then move on to the next world beyond this earth. But their goal is to help others. Okay, and just the Arhat is Theravada Buddhism's version of really that perfect person who has achieved this enlightenment. The last slide, again, just mentions a couple terms that you can see. Now, the ones here are under the Mahayana thought and worldview, but the two here, Shunyata and the Tathata, are mentioned, but that's where they actually come. So that's what I was referencing earlier about there's a lot of information under the branches of Buddhism. So when you're reading that, it can be kind of hard at first to go through all that information, but that's really the bulk of what the author is trying to get across to us. Now, one story I wanted to share that I really liked in the chapter that is contained, but our book refers to a woman who had a young child, and this child died. And she was, of course, very distraught, very upset, and she basically did all that she could, and, nothing helped. And she decided, hey, to go see the Buddha. She was hoping that the Buddha could help her and, somehow bring her child back to life. And so what Buddha basically told her is that she needed, or he needed mustard seeds in order to get the child alive and well again. And she would have to go to families and get mustard seeds, but the condition is that you would have to get them from a family that had not experienced death. Well, the woman was excited when what she heard, and so she went around and she tried to find the mustard seeds. Well, she had no problem doing that from families, but she did have problem finding a family that had experienced no death. So she basically had realized what the Buddha was trying to teach her, but death comes to everybody. And then once she came to that realization, she realized that there was nothing she could do for her child, and then she no longer, sought Buddha's help. and had her son cremated instead. So that's a very interesting story, but also quite tragic too. Now, there are other branches our book mentions, so I think I mentioned that a little bit, but I just wanted to give you one more mention of that. Our book does mention again with the arts and how Buddhism is full of that. And so whether it is writing poems, whether a haiku, and one of the most famous haikus that is of Buddhist origin is this. It's old pond, a frog jumps in, sound of water. But that has been hailed as a masterpiece. And of course, haikus are extremely short poems that are written in 3 lines, and that's why there's only 3 lines. Tea ceremonies, drinking tea, is really an art for Buddhist and Japan, but it is the purpose of that is to create and enjoy an atmosphere of harmony and beauty. But there's a really kind of science behind that for Buddhists. Flowers are important. I mentioned that earlier, and the flower arrangements that are used in Eastern societies like China and Japan are quite different than what we have here in Western societies. Gardens are very important. Calligraphy, the writing calligraphy is very important also as well. All right, and our author does mention a few of the trips he takes beyond the opening chapter at the beginning of the chapter, but just to experience different things related to Buddhism. And then when you finally today, when you mention Buddhism in the modern world, it is a worldwide religion. But there are parts of it that certainly people find fulfilling in the modern world, and there are some things that people don't. For example, celibacy, or the avoiding of sexual interaction, has not been embraced by the world, but there are things such as awareness, self-reliance, and insight that the world has really picked up on. So Buddhism is always changing, and a lot of things have helped it to expand. Japan opening up to foreigners was one way, and also people who have visited there and have brought their experiences back home is another way that Buddhism has expanded. I think every chapter has a section on the green movement related to religions, and so that fits well with Buddhism. And I think that is a pretty good, at least brief synopsis of what goes on in the chapter. So I hope this helps, and if I can help you further, please contact me, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you.